colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launch of the Asia-Pacific SDG Partnership Report, Responding to the COVID-19 Pandemic, Leaving No Country Behind. This launch is being organised by ESCAP, ADB and UNDP. My name is Katie Ellis and I'm from ESCAP and I will be your moderator for this session. This theme report is an annual publication produced by the partner organisations to support regional dialogue at the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. This launch will feature the key findings and recommendations of the report. Today, we're honoured to have distinguished speakers from the 3 partner organisations to officially launch the report, followed by our special guest remarks. We will then continue with any questions from the audience for our Q&A session. For those of you joining us on YouTube, please go ahead and type your questions in the chat box and my team will be here monitoring the chat and our speakers will be on hand to answer questions. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. We have Ms. Armida Saliza Alijabana, UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Mr. Bangbang Susantono, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development of ADB, Mr. Christophe Baouet, Deputy Assistant Administrator of UNDP, Deputy Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific and Director of the Bangkok Regional Hub, and our very special guest, Mr. Kung Pak, Deputy Secretary General for the Asean Social Cultural Community. I ask that all speakers kindly keep their cameras off whilst others are presenting. And now, without further ado, may I invite our Executive Secretary, Ms. Alijabana, to present the report.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to launch the Asia-Pacific SDG Partnership Report 2021 alongside my distinguished colleague, Pak Bambang Susantono from the Asian Development Bank, Pak Christophe Baouet from UNDP, and DSG Kun Pok from the ASEAN Secretariat. This year, the report entitled Responding to the COVID-19 Pandemic, Leaving No Country Behind, examines the impact of the coronavirus on the Asia-Pacific region and pathways for its resilient and inclusive recovery. COVID-19 is undermining the Asia-Pacific region's progress towards the 2030 agenda. The main concern is that the pandemic will reverse much progress on poverty reduction and also lead to greater divergence and inequality. This applies to the impact within countries, but also between countries. While the impact of the pandemic are economic, social, and environmental, their severity are determined by pre-existing economic, social, and environmental vulnerabilities in countries. The pandemic is an asymmetric shock. Existing vulnerabilities are clearly linked to uneven progress on SDGs between countries, but different vulnerabilities also determine the impact of the pandemic. This could widen the gaps between countries. Understanding how pre-existing vulnerabilities shape the impacts of the pandemic in the countries and subregions in the Asia-Pacific region is therefore crucial for designing policies that ensure no one and no country is left behind. I recognize that some of the economic, social, and environmental consequences of COVID-19 will be permanent. Moreover, governments' responses have also differed widely, reflecting differences in capacities of countries. The pandemic has therefore widened development gaps between countries due to pre-existing vulnerabilities, and there is a significant risk of a K-shaped economic recovery where some countries are likely to recover much faster than others. The rollout of the vaccine is merely the latest and most visible facet of an unequal region. An uneven recovery would deepen inequality between countries, despite our imperative to leave no one behind. The failure to implement policies that address such concerns are likely to worsen pre-existing vulnerabilities and make societies more unequal and polarized. In Asia and the Pacific region, digital transformation has provided opportunities and new solutions to development challenges. and the pandemic has speeded up the uptake of digital technology. Digital technology has helped governments, businesses, and people manage their pandemic responses and cope with containment measures. It is encouraging to witness that digital technologies cushion some of the impact of the pandemic lockdowns. Let me highlight some key impacts of digital technology for pandemic preparedness and response. In many countries, digital technology enabled early surveillance, testing, contact tracing, and strict quarantine measures, which managed to limit the death toll of the pandemic. Similarly, digital finance is an essential component of rebuilding and resilience. COVID-19 has demonstrated the transformative power of digital financing to meet development challenges and to increase levels of resilience. When the pandemic hit, countries with advanced government-to-person payment ecosystems were able to make transfers swiftly. In fact, there are many examples of how digital financial services and fintech can foster inclusive growth and resilience. However, there are risks and challenges. These relate to the digital divide. Many poor and vulnerable groups have been unable to afford or access digital options, and their availability is uneven across countries. Uneven digitalization, therefore, brings the risk of undermining progress on SDGs. The report, therefore, focuses on important enablers for digital transformation and digital finance. The quality and inclusiveness of the underlying digital system will largely determine whether we can avoid a K-shaped recovery. Better connectivity is one of the key drivers of digital transformation. Effective cross-border data sharing policies and interoperability are key to regionally integrated economies and critical to unlock the potential of digitalization to help achieve SDGs. May I highlight some key policy recommendations of the report? The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the interdependence of countries and the importance of cooperation for sustainable development. The Asia-Pacific region has a long and diverse experience with cooperation. Yet, despite the successes of many forms of our regional cooperation, the social and environmental dimensions of sustainable development have featured much less. Regional cooperation is required to manage and mitigate growing divergence and create the foundation for inclusive, resilient, and environmentally sustainable development. Regional cooperation must support people-centered development pathways through strengthening healthcare systems and public health emergency preparedness, enhancing skills, and strengthening social protection systems. Regional cooperation should advance new forms of cooperation in finance, especially digital finance, to improve access to public and private finance that supports the SDGs. Digital finance has a significant role here in ensuring that no country is left behind. The pandemic has demonstrated that economic cooperation, such as trade, must focus on the inclusion of all countries for a sustainable recovery. In the era of the pandemic, digitalization is perhaps the most powerful force transforming societies and economies. Regional cooperation on digital connectivity for the 2030 agenda is critical to enabling equitable digitalization that strengthens the region's resilience. However, digitalization is not a panacea as it can widen gaps in socio-economic development. We need renewed regional cooperation with a focus on people and planet to build back better and ensure no country is left behind. I urge participants to go to the Asia Pacific SDG Partnership website to read the full report and see examples of other knowledge partnership. I would like to thank our partners, the Asian Development Bank and UNDP, for their collaboration and contribution to prepare this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alijabana, for those findings. It is now my pleasure to hand over to Mr. Bangbang Susantono from ADB to deliver his remarks.
Thank you very much. And Thank you, and ESCAP Executive Secretary, Ibu Armida Alisabana, for your presentations. I'm delighted to join this launch on the 2021 SDG Partnership Report. We greatly value our long-standing partnership with ESCAP and UNDP of providing knowledge, data, and policy support to maintain global development agendas in our regions. To say 2020 was a challenging year is a gross understatement. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated the most vulnerable and left them further behind. It has exposed deep inequality in access to public services, health, and social protections. Our region was off track to achieve the SDGs even before this crisis. We have been reminded of this fact and its dire consequences many times in today's event and over the course of last year. However, we should remember that the SDG agenda was designed to address the very fragilities that the pandemic has exposed. This is the time that we should refocus our efforts to achieve the SDGs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as highlighted by Executive Secretary, there is a real risk that the pandemic may increase inequality and polarizations. But every crisis can be turned into an opportunity. The COVID-19 has provided us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make bold choices that puts us on a path to green, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable recovery in line with the ambitions of the SDGs. Digital transformation is one tool available to us today, more than during any other past crisis. This is the focus of our joint report. The rapid advancement in digital technology has offered a way to recoup some of the development gains and help spur a strong economic revival. We saw how pervasive mobility restrictions and lockdowns have driven companies to shift their businesses and services online. The use of digital technology and e-commerce has become the new business norm. The use of digital payments has also skyrocketed in many parts of the region. In the Philippines, for example, the leading mobile wallet company, GCash, saw a 700% year-to-year increase in transaction volume in June 2020 alone, and double its registered users in the first half of 2020. If promoted wisely, financial technology or fintech solutions can help secure a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the pandemic. But for that to happen, we need to find new ways to bridge the long-standing digital divide. We need to ensure that socially marginalized and vulnerable groups, including the poor, women, elderly, and rural communities, have the connectivity to join the digital economy and leverage fintech. At ADB, we have been helping countries bridge this divide in various ways. For example, we have made extensive investments in broadband connection for remote Pacific Island states. We also recently approved a $500 million loan in Indonesia to promote fintech-led financial inclusion for micro and small enterprises and marginalized groups. In Papua New Guinea, our project is using near-field communication technology to enable identity verifications, even in areas without electricity or internet. To realize the full benefit of digital transformations, policymakers across the region must work together to leverage the gains from technology, while regulatory harmonizations and policy coordinations should be enhanced in parallel. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, this is where regional cooperation and integration, or RCI, comes in. RCI has never been more important than today as we navigate out of the COVID-19 crisis toward inclusive and sustainable economic recovery. In the wake of pandemic, countries impose restrictive measures for cross-border cooperation and look inwards in their immediate response to the health crisis. But now, as we turn to recovery, RCI's new trajectory demands coordinated actions to restore growth and stability with a greater focus on the social and environmental dimensions. Let me highlight three key opportunity areas. First, regional cooperation can enable more equitable digitalizations, helping countries to share connectivity assets and infrastructure, and establishing common standards and interoperability of technologies. It is important to note that this offers a significant opportunity to advance gender equality in the region. For example, more girls can be integrated into the e-learning system and more female entrepreneurs can enter digital economy. Second, given the complexity of the dynamic relations between health, climate change, and economic development, our region needs to rethink its development strategies to build resilience in national and regional systems. We need to be prepared for new disease outbreaks and other shocks, which could be climate-related or economic. We at ADB are promoting digital technology use and data operations to support this objective. One example is the ongoing Greater Mekong Sub-Region Health Security Project, which helps improve regional cooperation and communicable disease control by strengthening regional disease surveillance and outbreak response systems. Third, the continued collaborations on sustainable finance is imperative. We need to scale up our experience in structuring sustainable focused financing instruments. For example, in August 2020, ADB's Asean Catalytic Green Finance Facility supported the government of Thailand access capital market for a post-COVID-19 green recovery by issuing sustainable bond series under the Sustainable Financing Framework. In all of these endeavors, partnership and collaboration are critical. I have mentioned this in my previous events. We can only realize the SDGs through strong global and inclusive partnership. So let me conclude by once again stressing that the SDGs have never been more. The pandemic should spur us to work even harder to recover better and build a healthier, safer, fairer, and more prosperous world. And everyone, including ADB, ESCAP, and UNDP, should take part in the work and ensure that no country and no person is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bambang Susantono, for those remarks. It is now my pleasure to introduce Christophe Baoué to deliver his remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kathy. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all and warm greetings from the UNDP regional office in Bangkok. Let me just say how privileged and happy I feel to join this very distinguished panel with Ibu Armida Bapak Bambang and DSG Kun Wak, whom I all know from my Indonesian days, and how honored I feel on behalf of UNDP to be joining all of you as we jointly launch this report of ESCAP, ADB, and UNDP today. This is a report with a very powerful title, Leaving No Country Behind, and I think that's a report that is very relevant to all of us, whatever our functions are. And this is, to me, a report that is of specific value in the sense that this report very convincingly documents and analyzes the asymmetric impact of COVID-19 in Asia Pacific, how it disproportionately affects our countries and groups of population. And I think this is really, we're just coming to the full realization of how devastating and long-lasting this asymmetric impact is, illustrated by the K-shape that Ibu Armida presented, with some going up and some going down, and then inequalities widening as a result, which then, put in jeopardy all progress toward the SDG and also a commitment to, make our commitment to leaving no one behind even stronger. The report also highlights a number of key issues, and I like just to single out 4 of them, because they are issues that are very fundamental, and they are issues that UNDP is working on in countries, working with government and other partners as part of our response to COVID-19 as technical lead, and we really came to see the importance of these issues. The first one is really accelerating digital transformation by a combination of technology innovation, but also rapid policy adaptation. And that is actually extremely important. I think we've seen over the last year how this digital acceleration has helped actually the continuity of provision of public services, the continuity of business operation. It has enabled country to respond to the pandemic, but we also now much better understand the potential of digital acceleration for the future of work, for better public services to all citizens, and also for a more equitable recovery among countries and population. But we also see, and that the report is very clear on this, that you still have a very significant digital divide between countries and within countries, rural, urban, or the gender divide. And I think, this gap needs to be addressed in terms of connectivity infrastructure, in terms of affordability, and also capacity of all groups to use technology. And we still have a lot of work to do in this area, as the report indicates. The second area is social protection, the importance of building a modern, universal, and inclusive social protection system. Now, there are social protection schemes in Asia Pacific, but on average, Asian Pacific countries spend less on social protection than the global average, and less than Latin America, where we have also many middle-income countries. And still, we've seen during the pandemic how important it is to have well-established, well-targeted social protection schemes that have allowed relief measures, emergency measures, to actually reach affected people. But we also understand that ad hoc measures cannot be a substitute for a standing and viable social protection system, and that therefore we need to evolve towards an universal system and actually, have those new systems in place to be able to invest in our people and also build resilience. That's a very important path to take. The third area is about governance. UNDP is very strongly committed to governance that is participatory, transparent, and accountable. Over the last years, we've seen what we can do in India, in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, working on technological platform for vaccine delivery, which is not only part of the response, but also brings transparency to the citizens. And we've seen also in Indonesia how we can work on e-governance with Korea to support the lapor system for citizen feedback. So we need actually to intensify our effort for such a transparent, accountable, and participatory governance. That's a message that needs to be taken to the country where we work. And the final area is the need to shift for recovery towards a sustainable development path. Very much a lesson to be drawn. We need to evade this narrow, exclusive focus on policy trade-off between the economy and the environment, and embrace climate actions, including energy transition, including nature, biodiversity protection, and really see it as the only long-term sustainable development path, which is also, by the way, one that will protect us from zoonosis and other pandemics. And of course, those issues, if they are to be addressed, have a cross-boundary dimension. They have a transnational dimension, and therefore call for regional cooperation, which UNDP and the other part of the UN system, and I believe ADB as well, very strongly promote and facilitate. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would just really like to express our gratitude to ESCAP and ADB for this joint work. I think UNDP is very committed to doing this report. We see the value of them. I believe they, inform the dialogue at the regional level. They feed this dialogue, but they also lead us to better target, better shape our response at the country level. And therefore, they have a double use, and we are very committed to continuing this partnership with ADB and UNESCAP as part of the excellent broader cooperation that we have in Asia Pacific. On this, I would like to encourage all of you to read this report, beautifully presented by Ibu Amida and explained by Bapak Bambang. And thank you again for your attention. Delighted to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bawe, for those remarks. And just a reminder to all of those who are joining us on YouTube, you can go ahead and ask questions. Our speakers will be on standby to answer those shortly. It is now my pleasure to hand over to our special guest, Mr. Kung Pok from Asean. So over to you.
Thank you, Ibu Amida, Pak Bambang, and Christoph. First of all, I'd like to congratulate, UNESCAP, the ADB, and also UNDP for launching this very important and timely report. And thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I think we come to, the same conclusion that if we look at the impacts of the COVID-19, it's extremely important that we protect everyone and every country as much as we can. Of course, the task ahead of us is, big given the size of the problems that we are facing at the moment. Let me, discuss a bit about the guiding principles that we are adopting when we are developing the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Actually, these guiding principles are always with us, which is, to make sure that our work is as inclusive as possible and sustainable and also resilient. And when we look at the impacts of COVID-19, and all the previous speakers, already mentioned about the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 on different, segment of the society, especially the vulnerable part of the societies who, hit the hardest by the pandemic. This is also, in line with a lot of works that we are, doing. And I have to say is that our, recent report, which is looking at the trajectory of our development paths, also adopt the inclusive and sustainable lens as well, to kind of, take stocks and review our previous work and what are the things that we need to do more to make sure that our peoples are protected, especially at times of crisis like this. Of course, if we look at the impact, especially during the early period of the pandemic, we can see clearly the problems that many peoples are facing, especially vulnerable populations, and it further exacerbates some of the current problems that we are having and some things that we're trying to address, for example, inequality. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to review our strategies and finding ways to go forward. And of course, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework is one of those endeavors. So the purpose of the framework is not just to help member states to reopen and also to recover, but also to build long-term resilience. By this, I would like to emphasize that the shorter the times that our countries and also our people are exposed to a shock like this, the better and the faster they can recover from this crisis. So it's extremely important that we help, as much as possible to make sure that all segments of the societies are receiving all kinds of support, especially our vulnerable populations here. I have to say is that ASEAN member states have been very responsive to the pandemic. When we received the notifications of abnormal pneumonia cases from our colleague from China and also from other parts of the world, and ASEAN member states were swift in taking actions. So the discussions about the development of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework started very early, and we managed to adopt it in November 2020. Another thing that I would like to also, share with the meetings, although the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework is one of our flagship documents, or the most visible response to COVID-19, other sectoral bodies are also, taking steps to address the impact of COVID-19 as well. For example, labor sector, social welfare sector, education sector, which are under the ASCC, had adopted a number of key documents and policies to help member states to respond to COVID-19, because it is not just the economic crisis that we are facing, but also social and environmental crisis as well. The nature of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework is multilateral in nature, because we believe that it's not there's no single country can address these problems alone. We need to work together, and we need to work as a team. So the components of the recovery framework are nicely fit with the regional framework and also the global framework. But another thing that is also important is also the priority of the member states as well. We don't have a uniform response to COVID-19, I have to say. Each member state has its own response strategies, but there are some common elements, some things that are presented in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Another thing is that the Comprehensive Recovery Framework is also cross-pillar and cross-sectoral in nature. This is some things that our previous speaker already mentioned about. Christoph also said about the impact of the pandemic is transnational. I totally agree with you, because this is some things that we witnessed firsthand. So when we are developing it, we want to make sure that all relevant sectoral bodies are working together to support the region to recover from this pandemic. If you look at the comprehensive recovery framework, there are 5 broad strategies, namely enhancing health system, strengthening human security, maximizing the potential of intra-ASEAN market and broad economic integration, and accelerating inclusive digital transformation, which is very relevant to the discussion that we're having this afternoon, and finally advancing toward a more sustainable and resilient future. So this broad strategy serves as steer for the implementation of the ACRF, both in terms of policies and programs. I would like to also elaborate that in line with the theme of the launch report, Broad Strategy 4 on accelerating digital transformation leverages on the momentum and imperative of digital transformations and aims to seize the opportunity presented by digital technologies to boost the economies and improve society in the post-COVID-19 world. This includes promoting e-commerce and digital economies, along with other initiatives on e-governments and e-service, digital connectivity, digital transformation, and increased investment in digital infrastructure in the era of the fourth industrial revolution. So these are the broad strategies, and we also have the implementation plan, which details all the activities and programs that member states need to do, both at the national levels and also at the regional level. When it comes to way forward, I have 4 points that I would like to share, and I hope that we can work together to support the ASEAN member state to recover well from this pandemic, and at the same time to invest more, not just in the health of our people or the security of our region, but also in our environments as well, because we know clearly from the COVID-19 no area is left untouched here. So the impact is real and painful for all sectors. It's important that we work together to address everything in a holistic manner. So the first point that I think we will continue to do, now that we have the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, the next thing for us to do is to make sure that the implementation of this framework is as effective as possible. So we need to put in place a monitoring a mechanism so that we can help the member state to track the progress, and at the same time to identify gaps, and if it requires to also have any corrective actions along the way to make sure that the comprehensive framework will help them to recover from the pandemic, and also to keep the people safe. The second point is, of course, now that we are facing this pandemic, all member states are facing, a lot of constraints, especially when it comes to financial resources. But I think it's also important, to make sure that the comprehensive recovery framework receive enough support in terms of resources, especially the financial resources, and so that we can make sure all of the priorities in the framework will be implemented to the extent that it will produce the results that we are hoping to achieve. The third point is to translate this priorities and programs and activity into national priorities and policy. This is also, similar to the point that Christoph just made, the policy adaptation. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, that, member states have different set of strategy, but of course we can find a lot of common grounds here between the national priority, the national strategies, and the regional comprehensive framework that we are developing here. And there's a lot of synergies there, but I think the important things for us is how we are going to support the member state to translate all of these strategies and priority into the national ones, so that they can make sure that they have all the support and the structure and institution to support the implementation of this framework. The last point, which is some things that we are doing today, is to continue to build partnership. I don't think that any member of the ASEAN member state, or even the ASEAN region as a whole, can emerge out of this crisis on its own. We need to work together with partners, and in this case, ESCAP, the ADP, Undp are our great partner, and we hope that we continue to work on this. I'd like to also share with the meetings that a few weeks ago we held the first ASCC Partnership Conference, and we presented all the priorities under the ASCC. Many of those priorities are, aiming to tackle the problems of the pandemic, and also to help people in the region, and also to protect the environment. And we receive a lot of positive feedback. And during the meeting, we also have colleagues from ESCAP and other international agencies as well. So I'd like to conclude my interventions here, and more than happy, to discuss further during the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fung, for those remarks, and a big thanks to all our speakers so far. This will now commence our Q&A session and segment of our session. We have been receiving some questions, so I will start off with the first question, which is, given ESCAP's strength as a convening power of member states, how has ESCAP been supporting the region to recover from COVID-19? So I shall pass this one over to Ms. Alijabana to answer that question.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you very much for the question on how ESCAP supporting the region in responding to the COVID-19 crisis. Of course, since last year, at the onset of the pandemic, the impact is immediately felt across the region, especially the socio-economic impact. Therefore, ESCAP then set up this framework, the socio-economic framework to mitigate the socio-economic impact. Several elements of that framework that we outline, and also as a basis for our support to countries in the region. First and foremost is how to protect the people and the livelihoods. Second is how also to mitigate the economic impact. And third is on this trade value chain and connectivity, because the region depends very much on the past growth trajectory on this regional value chain and connectivity. So how to build resilience in the value chain as well as the connectivity. And last is, but this is a medium to longer term effort, is on the environment and ecosystem. And this framework, this is the framework that we still work on, and we believe we are building further within this framework to scale up the effort and our support and leading to the recovery in the region. And again, one element that we develop further is certainly, in which is the core of our report, today's partnership report, is on the digitalization. Over.
Thank you, Ms. Alijabana. And that actually ties in quite well to our next question, which is given widening digital divides within and between countries, how do we embrace and accelerate digitalization in ways that ensure green, inclusive, and resilient recovery across the region, and reinvigorate regional cooperation to ensure that no country is left behind? So I think for this one, we might go to Mr. Susantono from ADB. And so you are also welcome if you would like to present a little bit more on the substance of the report as one of the report authors as well, if you wish. So over to you.
Thank you, Katie. I think it's a very valid questions, very important questions. One of the main messages of this report is actually we have to prevent the K-shaped recovery, which is the, at one hand, where the digitalization can accelerate and also facilitate those who already in the digital savvy, for example, situations or digital connected situations. But on the other hand, for those who are still not digital literate, or we call it digital illiterate, for example, they will be left behind, and we are afraid that the widening gap will be bigger and bigger. So in this situation, I think that it's a multiple way. It's not only the digitalization for digitalization, but we have to see that in a more comprehensive way. For example, the digitalizations can facilitate more inclusive development if there is a ICT infrastructure available. There's no way that we have our broadband, but we don't have, for example, a good infrastructure IT on the ground. So that is an area that also needs some attention to accelerate the infrastructure. And the other one is also the policy framework. We need a good policy framework that enables both who will be on the driver seats of economic recovery, as well as those who are not on the driver's seat, meaning that they are the one that's really trapped on the digital poverty kind of situation. So I guess in this situation, we have a multiple level of interventions and also cooperation. One is on the regional level, as being mentioned by Ibu Armida, that regional cooperation in this situation is really important, because what we are facing right now, like the pandemic situation, is regional public bad. We call it that, as opposed to regional public goods. So for that to prevent or to tackle, we have to have a good regional cooperation. At the national level, we also have to have a good policy framework, national intervention, for example, on those areas that only states can able to facilitate, for example, on the social protection kind of issue. And at the local level, it is a people also, it's a community level that should also, be part of the whole effort to really mitigate and also try to build back better in this kind of situation. So if I may, Katie, I would like also to invite the author of ADB to add something. Perhaps my colleague Smita, you can add something from the report if you want.
Thank you very much, VP Susantono, and thanks for the opportunity to offer a few additional reflections on how the report opines on this particular question. So as you know, the potential of digitalization to unlock progress on the SDGs is a particular emphasis of the report. And in terms of the role of regional cooperation in facilitating greater connectivity and helping countries to bridge digital divides, we emphasize the importance of exchange and learning, collective investments in connectivity infrastructure, the opportunity for countries to work together to meet the needs of the most vulnerable countries in the region and those that have the biggest gaps, as it were, to bridge in terms of these digital divides. We also emphasize the fact that that digitalization is inherently an enabler of some of the 5 proposed new priorities for regional cooperation that we highlight in the report. So we emphasize that through digitalization, we can enable regional cooperation to focus more on people-centered pathways towards sustainable development. We emphasize the potential for, through bridging digital divides, we can create a better space for the least developed countries to participate in regional economic cooperation systems and value chains. We can help foster new forms of industry that empower entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises by harnessing the potential of the digital economy. So there's a range of ways in which that regional cooperation to bridge digital divides in turn facilitates regional cooperation with a strengthened emphasis on green, resilient, and inclusive approaches through cooperation. So that's what I would add to what VP Susantono has already said. And these are, of course, core priorities for our 3 institutions looking ahead into the future.
Thank you so much, Smita and Mr. Susantono, for those remarks and for your input. That's great. And now we're moving on to our next question, which is, countries have prioritized social protection systems to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, including the use of digital platforms to facilitate targeting of populations and the management of their social protection systems. Could you please provide any examples of how UNDP has been supporting social protection and digitalization in countries of the region? So, Mr. Bawe, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Yes, as I mentioned, social protection has been a major area of work for UNDP, both for the emergency response and also for the longer term. And we've done that with a number of partners, including for the UN system. I think it has a policy dimension, and I should not overlook that. I think we've been working on documenting the experience, targeting the experience gain, and look at the policy changes. So that policy dimension for adaptive universal protection has been very important, including advocacy for temporary basic income or universal basic income. So that's one. Technology, the question mentioned it, I think that has actually played a role, especially when you look at the need for emergency rapid disbursement at very local level. and we've actually done some, interesting work using apps, including with the private sector, using apps to actually work with the ministries and the local governments to actually have the, emergency relief cash given to the people. Using app has been a very good way, and I think that could be something that is, can be developed further. And I think here we should not take, social protection only. If you look at the broader issue of provision of basic services, we've seen a lot of potential also for use of technology in telemedicine. And I think in countries, Indonesia and others, UNDP has been working with Ministry of Health, but also Ministry of Research and Technologies to see how we can actually expand the use and access of telemedicine, teleeducation. So I think that's it's a very important dimension. And again, when it comes to technology, let me mention that it's not related to social protection, but it's related to the protection of the people through vaccine, the use of platform technology to track the vaccine chain, to actually monitor the delivery, the storage, is part of health governance. And that's something that in India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, UNDP has been very actively working. And in the context of the COVID-19 response, that's something we're exploring with more countries, building on the experience gained in these 3 countries, and actually help protect the people from COVID-19 contamination by effective vaccine chain. So these are the kind of examples I could give to illustrate the point. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bowe. Thank you for that response. We have received more questions, so I'll move on to the next one, which is, do you have any further reflections on how ASEAN countries will work together in practice to deliver on the aspirations of the ASEAN Recover Framework? Mr. Kung, I would like to pass that over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. As I mentioned in my interventions, when the pandemic hit, all the member states were responsive and swift, responding to the COVID-19. Again, at the early stage, there were different responses and so on. But there's a strong coordination and collaboration at the regional levels as well. There are many meetings going on, not just among the ASEAN member states, but also between ASEAN member states and partners. And the consultation, the discussions happen at various levels, not just at the technical level, but also at the political level as well. We even hosted the special summit between ASEAN and our partners on how we can work together to tackle these problems. So of course we are talking about the commitment. It is there. And that's the reason why we managed, to produce this ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Again, going forward, when it comes to the implementation of the framework, it requires even closer cooperation among the ASEAN member states. Actually, not just ASEAN member states, but also all partners that are working with us. And many of them are expressing, strong support and ready, to work with us on these important matters. Given the scope and scale of the framework, it requires a lot of resources, and this is some things that we have to reimagine. Our financing strategies. We need to be smart and creative, given the fact that some member states we have some difficulties in mobilizing enough resources to work on this particular framework. But I think it is very clear that it's the top priority, not just the Vietnam as the previous chair of ASEAN, even the current chair of ASEAN also prioritized this, and it's going to be with us for quite some time. So I can say is that when it comes to the commitments and also the support, we all have this. Another things that I would like to emphasize, although as much as we want the framework to be implemented by the ASEAN member state, we have to also be practical and adopt a phased approach as well. Let me give an examples of the inclusive digital transformation. it is not just about adopting technology, but also to build an ecosystem to support the adoption of such technologies. And we learned this very clearly, from the impact of COVID-19. In particular, our education system. We go online, but many of our young people cannot afford to take advantage of the digital education and so on. So all of this crack, if you can say, it is some things that we have to further work on. So again, to make sure that all of the countries in the Asean region can emerge out of this crisis, we need to work together, not just in terms of policy coordination, but also in co-mobilizing the resources and helping one another, especially the vulnerable part of the region, to cope with the shock and to emerge as quickly as possible. And this can be done through various forms. It could be through the technical support from other member states, and this is some things that they also receive from our partner as well. But also, the resources and the technical support that we can, mobilize to support ASEAN member state. Again, I totally agree that going forward it requires even closer and stronger partnership. But in terms of the commitments, among the member states to work together to address this problem, that is there. And now we can see that some of the member states, if not all, translating some of the priorities into their national priority already. So we are hoping to see more positive development this year, next year. But we need to continue to help them to monitor the progress so that they know whether things are happening on the right track or not. That's why I mentioned it as one of the 4 way forward that we need to continue to do in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kung, for that response. I think we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So the next question we have received is, countries have built digital health platforms to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic to manage health threats. Could you please provide some examples of how UNDP has been promoting such digital health platforms? Mr. Bawe, can I hand the floor to you for that question? Thank you.
Yes, Kathy, but I might be very brief because those are the very example earlier with India, the EVIN done with federal states, very successful experimentation, I would say, through a software of improving health governance through the vaccine chain. Then that was actually replicated in Indonesia with 2 pilot districts around Jakarta. Excellent cooperation with the government, and now being actually scaled up and expanded, and that's a very welcome development. And then Bangladesh, where we actually more broadly engage as UNDP together with national partner on the A2I initiative. Which has, a lot of technology, artificial intelligence dimension, and it's one of the flagship program of UNDP in Bangladesh. But not to repeat what I say on the vaccine and what we are trying to do as UNDP as part of the response, but really underline the huge potential that exists in Asia Pacific for digitalization. And use of technology in all respects. And I think it's not only about economic progress, it's also about social progress. If we think about, leaving no country behind, we have to make sure that we work with the countries in Asia where, where there is still a significant gap in digitalization, and that we really, support them. And then that within countries, we have an inclusive approach to technology development, to digitalization, because this is really what will help us reduce the the inequality. So I see this as a major vector for both leaving no country behind, the title of the report, and leave no one behind, which is our collective commitment. And that's a very fundamental part of UNDP socioeconomic response to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bawe. Well, I think this leads us to our last question. And what I might do is pose this one to all the authors. So the question is, how has technology supported ESCAP to communicate effectively with all COVID measures with member states, and what is the role of technology moving forward? So we might pose that to ESCAP, ADB, and then UNDP. So I will start with Ms. Ali Jabana, if I could hand the floor to you first.
Yeah, thank you very much for the last question, yeah, on the role of technology. And actually, if we speak about technology, very closely related also to innovation. So I may as well link technology and innovation. And again, if we speak of technology, it is not only for the technology for its sake, yeah, but how to apply the technology, how to mainstream the technology to all of our work. So within this context in ESCAP, we do a lot of work utilizing ICT as well as application and space application as well as all its application to innovation. Yes, so let me give one example for the latter part, the last part, which is on innovation. We also utilizing ICT, in this case, digital technology. For example, one of two example, yeah, we have this project on catalyzing women entrepreneurship using fintech, financial technology. How to empower women entrepreneurs, SMEs in 6 different countries in our region, and the countries are the so-called CSN countries with special needs. It's the least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, as well as the SIDS. Yes, to how to empower these women entrepreneurs, and also equip them with these digital skills, with seed capital, and then scale up their businesses, as well as scale up to other women entrepreneurs in that particular country. And then second is we also mainstream the space application, not the space technology, but space application in our work related to disaster risk reduction, climate change. And therefore, we support policymakers in the countries in our region to have a better inform in terms of data information for them to have also to formulate a better policy to tackle these very, very urgent issues of climate change, including pollution as well as disaster risk reduction, yeah, including the early warning system for disaster risk mitigation and so on. So this is how we again develop in not so much the technology that we develop, yeah, because we are not the institution to develop the technology per se, but how we apply the technology and mainstream the technology in our work, and also to better serve and support the country in our region. One last example that I would like also to share is on this social enterprise inclusive business, social entrepreneurship, which is very important, and this gain traction to also upscale, yeah, the various services that they can offer. For example, in the health sector, in education, in the commerce, e-commerce, SME, and so on. So therefore, with this can be leveraged further to attain SDGs, and also with all these multiple objectives, including poverty eradication and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ali Jabana. I will now pass that question over to Mr. Susantono. So just to clarify, it's around how technology has helped ADB and to cope with the pandemic and communicate with member states, sustain cooperation and exchange. Over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. I think the way that we worked in the last 1 year speaks for itself. Our landing level is not going down, it's going up. And we are communicating with our development member country official in many countries with all the digital technology helps. The way that we, for example, monitor, verify, and reporting also using a lot of new kind of digital technology, as well as the new technology like the drone to, for example, trying to see the projects and try to assess what is happening to the project. That speaks for itself. But I would like to echo Ibu Armida and also Pak Christopher points that technology is not for all technology. I think that we have to really embed it in another aspect like the economic, the social kind of things, and also new things are the very important thing that will be affecting our development in the future. For example, the climate change issue. So that we have to think on the system approach, blending all the health, transportation, logistic, gender, the SMEs, for example, all the dimension and put it as a holistic approach. That's number one. So we are relying on the system approach. Second one, we should not also lose sight on the short-term issues. We have also to see the medium-term and also long-term issues, and that is why the Build Back Better, how we will back on track, and not only back on track, but also try to catch up. What is our target for the SDG in 2030 will be very important in the future. And lastly, for the technology, I would like also to emphasize the word appropriate technology. So technology that's suitable with the local conditions, the social, institutional, and also political value on specific issues, because there is no one size fits all in technology. We have to also, for example, considering the local wisdom in trying to deploy the new technology on the ground. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now hand over to Mr. Bawe, just from UNDP, to respond to that question on technology, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, just like ESCAP and ADB, I think technology has really been the one factor that allows UNDP to go on with business continuity, continuing the exchange with our partners, national and international online, in not only delivering, keeping up our delivery, but actually increasing our delivery and also keeping up with accountability, with electronic signing of documents and all the financial management. But I think extrapolating on the internal experience of UNDP, and then bring it to the region level, I think I fully agree with Ibu Armida. The strong link between technology and innovation is something we've seen through our response to COVID-19, through our programming. I think there is also an acceleration dimension, and that's why UNDP has set up a number of accelerator labs. Technology is a very powerful accelerator, and that's really what we need to capitalize on. And I think the third dimension is really reflecting on our experience, with our business continuity, is actually integration. Technology permeates all the areas which UNDP is working. And I talked earlier about the social dimension, but let me also talk about the environmental dimension, the green recovery side. We really see the use of technology as essential, as part of a central part of UNDP work. If you talk, for instance, about handling of medical waste, technology is very important. We've seen also the importance of technology working, on plastic pollution in India, in Vietnam, in the Pacific. And I think when we talk about, green recovery, technology will have a key role to play in all sectors. And that's, even more true if countries in Asia Pacific embrace circular economy, which is, something we very much believe on from experience in other countries in the region and increasingly in Asia Pacific. And here again, technology will have to play a key role in promoting and implementing circular economy in Asia Pacific, which I really hope we'll be able to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bawe. And just before we close, I might also give Mr. Kung an opportunity to respond to that question on technology as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree that technologies or innovation can be a great enabler and also a great divider as well if we don't use it in an appropriate way. Of course, we cannot stop digitalization. It's going to accelerate even quicker into the future. What we can do is that innovation will work for everyone, not just a few, and it happens in a way that it will not produce a lot of emission. I think ASEAN is notorious, but the numbers of meetings that we have, we're having almost 2,000 meetings a year, and now with digital technologies and so on, we managed to do a lot of them virtually for this year or last year, almost entirely. I would like to also, give some examples on how digital technology or technology in general have help assisted us in our work. For example, in the past, when it comes to the monitoring and evaluation work, it's often some things that we continue to improve. But given the rapid development in technology, this time when we are developing the ASEAN agreement on disaster management programs and work plan, we are now changing our strategy to adopt digital technology in this case to help us to monitor and to track the progress of our work. Another thing is, as part of our response to COVID-19, we are establishing this ASEAN portal for public health emergency and emerging diseases. It's a data hub that would give all the people all the information and data about our responses to COVID-19. And we are going to launch the portal next month during the health minister meeting. So these are just some examples of how we are doing this. Finally, I would like to also share with you, and I totally agree with Pak Bambang as well. When it comes to leveraging technology, we have to adopt systematic thinking here, because technology is not a standalone component. It works for others, it works for itself. So we need to make sure that we use it in a ways that help us to achieve other purposes as well. For ASEAN, we are now finalizing the consolidated strategies on for industrial revolution. So that such a document will help a member state to adopt technologies in a ways that would help them to address the problem, but at the same time to make sure that we make the technologies and innovation work for everyone's, and also happens in a way that it will not produce a lot of or if possible zero emission or some things that could help us in addressing the environmental issue. Of course, when it comes to the actual environmental work, technology has been supporting the sector in many ways. Some of those have already mentioned by Christoph, for example, tracking marine debris or tracking the forest fire or pitland and so on. These are just some of the examples on how we are leveraging technology in our work, especially at the sectoral level. But for ASEAN, we're also taking advantage a lot from this, especially when it comes to facilitating our engagement and ongoing discussion with partners and also member states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kung, and thank you to all our speakers today, all our very distinguished speakers, and a big thanks as well to everyone who joined us on YouTube and to everybody who sent in their questions. We hope you all get a chance to read this year's report. That officially closes today's proceedings. Thanks a lot.